is the fourth video in the biogeochemical pathway cycle unit, and tonight's video is on the nitrogen cycle. This will help us review for our test that is on Friday. To begin with, 78% of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen gas, and this is in a form that most of us can't use. There are few organisms on Earth that can take nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into a usable form. But there are three ways in which we can get nitrogen into the soil where it can be used. One of those is by nitrogen fixation through lightning. Another way is the application of artificial fertilizers. And then the third way is by what are referred to as nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Now, the whole reason why we care about the nitrogen cycle is that you need nitrogen for DNA, you need it for protein. We can't live without nitrogen. Okay, so ultimately what has to happen is it has to be plants that can then turn into a usable form for us animals to be able to consume and get our nitrogen from. But in order for that to happen, there are a couple different ways. If the nitrogen is in the soil, the plants can absorb it through their roots. But there are a special group of bacteria that live within certain plants, and they help provide nitrogen for the plant so that it can grow and be healthy. And these grouping of plants are called legumes. And these are soybeans, clover, alfalfa, peas. And so what they have is they have a special mutualism partnership with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, where the bacteria live in the roots of the plants, and so they provide the nitrogen for the plant itself. Any excess nitrogen then is put into the soil, and in exchange for the nitrogen being available to the plant provides it sugar, the bacteria sugar, so that the bacteria can survive. So once this nitrogen is in protein and other organic compounds, along come animals and they eat this protein, the DNA, other organic molecules. You may eat other animals to get it, but through feeding, that's how we get our nitrogen for what we need. And some of this nitrogen then is then returned to the earth through waste such as like manure or dead leaves, or through dead animals. And so there are a group of decomposers that live in the soil there that help break down animal and plant material and return nutrients to the soil. And so with that then, plants can then take that material back up, and you can start the whole cycle over again for animals then to consume it. This is one of the ideas behind like a compost pile. Now, if all the nitrogen that gets fixed into the soil stayed there forever, we'd eventually end up with no nitrogen back in the atmosphere, which wouldn't be very good either. But we do want to keep nitrogen that we do have there at certain times. There are a group of bacteria that are responsible for returning nitrogen back to the atmosphere, and these are called denitrifying bacteria. Denitrifying bacteria take the nitrogen that's in the soil and they turn it back into atmospheric nitrogen. Now, as a homeowner, you may have a lawn where during the summer you might fertilize it to keep it healthy and green, and you don't want these denitrifying bacteria there. And so you might have your lawn aerated where they punch holes into the lawn. And the reason they do this is it allows more oxygen to get into the soil, because these denitrifying bacteria don't work as well in the presence of oxygen. They still work, but just not as well. This is the same idea as farmers tilling the soil before they plant their crops for the year. By turning over that soil, you're allowing oxygen to get down there, and you're limiting the effectiveness of this denitrifying bacteria. And then the last thing I want to talk about the nitrogen cycle here is the use of rotation of crops. So farmers spend a lot of money on fertilizers for their crops, and if they can reduce the cost of that fertilizer usage and also reduce their fertilizer use in general, it would be better for their wallet and our earth, because fertilizers tend to run off in the water cycle into streams and pollute streams there, or lakes or ponds. But by rotating their crops, they can plant a cash crop like tobacco, which might drain the soil of its nutrients one year, and then they plant something like clover the next year, where these legumes and their nitrogen-fixing bacteria return nitrogen to the soil. So if you rotate your crops and you're constantly replenishing the nitrogen that's in the soil using bacteria, you're not having to use as much fertilizer as somebody that just plants tobacco year after year after year. Remember, we have a test on Friday. Your projects are due Wednesday along with the paper. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and remember there are questions on Nomia for the extra credit.